All right, what is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another day of SaberSim's DFS office hours. It is Tuesday, November 1st of 2022. Man, year is coming to an end quick. Gonna be Christmas before we know it. Gonna be 2023 really soon. But until then, still got a lot of DFS to play. If you are new here, welcome. My name is Andrew. I'm one of the coaches here at SaberSim. This is a show where we go over how to use the SaberSim app, answer any and all questions from users in our Discord server. If you're not a member of our Discord server, there is a link in the description below to join. You get your questions into the office hours channel ahead of time. If you're just tuning in and you have some questions, just go ahead and throw them in the YouTube chat and I will get to them after we get through all of the questions in Discord. Gonna be a little bit of a special start here. Got a new feature that we just released yesterday. Saw some questions about it, so wanted to talk about this specific feature first. So that being said, let's get the SaberSim app pulled up here, and I'm going to click over to this build that I ran right before we got started, and going to jump around a little bit. I know I have to touch on a question from yesterday that came in from Neil, but we're going to get started here with going over the new lineup percentiles. So going to get this in the YouTube chat, and the question that came in Discord is please go over the new percentiles update and how you would use that info for DFS. I think this is a great question, great way to get our day started here. So that being said, new feature, where is it? What is it? What can I do with it? So all good questions. So if you guys remember, we used to have this little drop down right over here in the post build screen next to the search bar that said percentiles. And what you could do is you could change the average projection for players to one of their percentile outcomes that you typically see in the home screen. And, if I were to go back to the home screen really quickly, what I'm talking about are these 25th, 50th, 75th, 85th, 95th, and 99th percentile outcomes. Just a quick review there. So those are the projections are the point projection outcomes that a player meets in their range of outcomes in the Sims. So, Wendell Carter Jr., his 99th percentile outcome is 55.6. What that is saying is that in 1% of Sims in our database, he reaches or exceeds this outcome. And that's the best way to think about the percentiles at any level. And, the way we used to do this is that, how do we take advantage of this, right? So we used to have this feature where you could change the average projections to one of the percentile projections. Problem with this is that basically what it is assuming is that every single player in the player pool reaches or exceeds their 95th percentile outcome. And that's just not going to happen. Some players are going to do good. Some players are going to do bad. Some players are going to be right at about what their mean is. It was just a really, really blunt tool of trying to incorporate player upside into your lineups. So, where can we go from there, right? That's the question. So what the team has been working on behind the scenes, I know we've teased it a little bit, is these new lineup percentiles. So what this is it's really similar to the way it looks is really similar to the player percentiles, but what this does is that once the lineups are built, it grades the lineups and has a score for different outcomes that this lineup scored in our entire pool of Sims. So for instance, we have this lineup here. The average projected score is 302.7. The 95th percentile, and if you, I don't know if you could do it, but the 95th percentile outcome here is 351 points. So it's saying that, 5% of the time in our sim database, this lineup scored reached or exceeded 351 points. And I think that's the best way to think about it, because before, like, and just like to be clear, if I were to go and get the 95th percentile projections from the home screen, add them up, this number here, this lineup percentile of 95 would not equal the 95th of each player combined. Because what happens in that scenario is that, okay, take an outcome that happens 5% of the time for Jalen Suggs, and then take another outcome that happens 5% of the time for Chris Paul, because we're taking the individual players' 95th percentile outcomes. So you're basically like parlaying each player to get there. This lineup percentile is saying the lineup as a whole reaches or exceeds this number 5% of the time. So it's much more accurate and much more likely outcome, as opposed to parlaying all of these individual 95th percentile outcomes. We are looking at the lineup as a whole and saying that, across our sim database, this lineup reaches or exceeds this point projection value 5% of the time. So I think that's the best way to try and wrap your brain around it. And obviously this would change, if you're using 99th or 85th, the core concept is the same. The number of times that lineup reaches that metric is what ultimately would change. So, the question is, what can you do with it? How do you incorporate it into your process? If you're not sure what to do with it. So what I do want to say is that SaberScore is taking this into account already. So if we go over to SaberScore, SaberScore is quantifying the impact of upside in your lineups. Upside is basically outcomes above the mean for players and lineups. So SaberScore is already incorporating lineup percentiles into it, but it's also incorporating correlation and ownership. So if you want to use the percentiles, basically what you're saying is you are saying like, hey, show me raw upside without correlation and without ownership grading. If, you say like, hey, I'm going to take ownership and correlation into account with the sliders, I don't want to grade for it with SaberScore. I would rather at this point just look at upside. I think that's totally okay to do. And I think it's like a very personal choice whether or not you want to grade your lineups in that way. I would say that, as for especially like for sports where duplication is important, I would continue to use SaberScore. I think it is a little better just because like lineups that are showing up as the optimal multiple times in the sims get a SaberScore boost and are going to be higher in your pool. But, if you're just saying like, hey, show me without correlation and ownership taken into account in the lineup grading, I think the percentiles are a great use. So, still a really new feature. I'm still kind of, wrapping my head around it and figuring out how I want to incorporate it into my own process. But I think it's a really neat feature overall. I know that when Max Steinberg took down the $1 million victory and came on and talked about his process, he said that he was using the percentiles for that specific NFL showdown slate. So, definitely is a worthy tool. It's a objectively better than the previous, percentiles for the player projections that we used to have. So that feature is now gone, replaced by this much better metric. So if you were using that before, I would highly encourage you to, if that's like a big part of your process, start using the lineup percentiles. It is a much better tool overall. And what it's ultimately, why we decided to replace the custom projection override. So give that a shot. Let me know if you guys have any questions about it. If you guys encounter bugs or different things that come up while you begin to use it, just reach out to support@sabersim.com and our support team will be able to take care of you. Oh my gosh, I have something in my eye. Driving me crazy. Or, if you're running into issues, you can always use the report a problem link up in the top right. But, went through rigorous testing, shouldn't be anything crazy that you guys are seeing. If you do, just reach out to support in Discord or via the app right away. So those are my thoughts on lineup percentiles. Hope I explained it well for you guys. And if anyone has any more questions, just get it in the chat and we can continue to talk about it as, people start using it, get familiar with it, have more questions. Totally happy to continue talking about it. So going to touch on the question that came in yesterday from Neil. Neil was asking about running cash builds for NFL Showdown. I told Neil that I would get back to him because I knew that was something that Jordan did regularly in his process. So I wanted to talk to Jordan about it and get back to everybody on stream. I actually responded to Neil yesterday just because I wanted to give him an answer before the showdown, but I'm going to go ahead and read what I wrote to Neil. So I said, Neil, I spoke to Jordan and wanted to get you an answer before lock. Jordan typically uses the cash builds to do two things: try to see who is going to be the most popular captain and what stack constructions are most common. Are we seeing even stacks like 3 threes? Are we seeing 4 twos where the favorite is always the 4, or 5 ones where the favorite's always the 5? And then he said he didn't think what you were attempting to do with with cash builds and salary was negative EV in any way. I think if you like that approach, then it's totally okay to keep that step in your process. So, what Neil was doing is he was running a cash build, a cash optimal for NFL Showdown, seeing what the optimal salary was, and then basically eliminating salary above that threshold. So the optimal salary came in at 49,000. Then he was trashing everything between 49.1 and 50,000 for DraftKings, or I believe FanDuel goes up to 60,000 if I'm not mistaken. So, it's an interesting concept, something I haven't heard a lot of people talk about before. Jordan was really interested by it, said that, if it's something that you're finding success with and something that you think adds value, continue to try it out. Be, always be open to making adjustments to your process. But, I think it is pretty interesting concept to, run a cash build. And we'll just talk about like the Thursday night game coming up. So it doesn't look, oh yeah, we have ownership up in the app, but not a big FanDuel guy. So I'm gonna hover over here to DraftKings, a little familiar territory. So we're gonna switch this to cash, and then we're gonna run 40 lineups and see what's coming up. What I think is really interesting is the stack construction component of it. So just last night we saw a game where, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that the winning construction last night was a 5-1 Brown stack, which, given the total, given the team totals and given the spread, the Bengals were like a -3.5 favorite. And I bet you if we, open up some of these stack constructions, so if we want to see, who's being favored, so we can see that 3-3 stacks, we're mostly seeing Houston, which is really interesting. Let's look at our whole pool of 40 here. So in our whole pool, we're seeing more Houston than Philly, and then we're also seeing 5-1 like leaning Philly. So that's like really interesting to me. I don't know why it would be like that, but these are things that cash builds could tell you. I mean, we're seeing a 10-point spread for the Thursday night game. I mean, I know this is like a first look and it's really early, but I mean, maybe there is some pricing discrepancy that we're not seeing. And, I think one thing we could see is like the highest salary captain with the highest point projection is Dameon Pierce at 12.9. And then you come over here and Jalen Hurts is 17.7. Miles Sanders is 15.6. AJ Brown is 16,008. So, maybe there's like a salary component, and you could look at the spread and say, oh, probably going to be a lot of Philly heavy stacks. But then you run like a cash build trying to mimic a traditional optimizer, and what you learn is that you can fit a lot more projected points using 4 Houston players. So that's intuitively what you would think. It's opposite, but that's what doing some of these things can help you do. It sounds like that's what Jordan likes to do. So, going to see like a lot of Jalen Hurts captains with 4 Houston players. Like that's a construction I don't intuitively think of. So I think there's definitely something to be gained from running a cash build as part of your process. And, if you want to pick different nuggets from it, I think it's totally okay. So want to get back to Neil there and going to continue with other questions that we had. I see a couple questions in the YouTube chat. We are going to get to everything. Promise you guys that. Only a couple more questions in Discord, but I'm going to hit this question from Rich Riley. And he said, I know when you adjust a player's individual projection, how it affects the sims. However, when you change the game score, how does that factor into the sim output? Last night, I adjusted the score 31-14 Browns, but was still getting a ton of 5-1 and 4-2 Bengals stacks, and it didn't make a ton of sense. Okay, I think that this is a really, really good question. So, Rich, you hit the score kind of on the nail there. I mean, it was really close. I think it was like 32-16. So, let's go back to week 8, and then we'll pull up the showdown from yesterday. So got the showdown from yesterday. So, okay. So adjusting team totals, what's happening? So what is basically happening is that, think of all of our game score outcomes on a spectrum across the sim bucket. So in our entire sim database. So the average scores in the sims are what are shown here. If you adjust these, we are going to trim off games from one direction or the other to try and shift the mean score closer to the values you've set. So if in your example, you say 31 Cleveland, 14 Cincinnati. So I'm going to hit apply changes. So what this is going to do is that it's going to start shaving off sims where Cincinnati scores really, really high to bring Cincinnati's team total lower. And then it's going to shave off game sims where Cleveland scores really, really low to try and boost Cleveland's team total to 31. So that's essentially what's happening. And that is what is being reflected here. So like, I prefer to look at flex rather than captain, but what we can see is this adjusted SaberSim projection versus the original. So we'll show you the original, and then we'll show you the adjusted with your changes applied. So, Joe Burrow comes down 5 points. Mixon and Higgins, top players for Cincinnati also come down. You're going to get a boost. Guys like Nick Chubb and Jacoby Brissett, as we can see here. So, like right off the bat, this looks pretty consistent. Brown's defense scores a lot more points. So this is kind of what I would expect to see right off of the bat. Bengals defense scores less points. So then let's run some lineups and see what this looks like. So I'm just going to, run 500 lineups, and then we will interpret this. But so far, it looks like it's doing what it should be doing or what we would expect. So lineups are finishing running now, and we are going to go into, I want to look at the full pool just for the sake of this example. And, right off the bat, getting a lot of Nick Chubb captain, which we would expect. If they have a big lead, they're probably running the ball a lot, especially later in the game. Got some Jacoby Brissett leverage as well. Let's look at our stack types. So seeing a lot more 4-2s. We're going to see who they are favoring. So let's go over to our 4 stacks. seeing 28% Cleveland to 12% Cincinnati and 15% Cleveland 5 stacks to 3% Cincinnati. So, Rich, not really sure exactly what you were seeing. Happy to walk through it though. This is exactly kind of what I would expect to happen. I would say that, if you make a change and the results are not what you were intending them to be or expected them to be for that matter, what I would do is I would hit this red reset icon and I would try applying them again. And, it's possible something went wrong or a mistake was made. I'm not saying you did or didn't. Sometimes it could be like the builder, not really sure. But, this red reset icon is always a good place to go when things are kind of acting funny, not working right. So I would try that and then redo your adjustments and then see what the outputs are then. You can always reach out to support. We try hard to be around, especially as lock leads up. So if there's anything that you're having trouble with, throw a question in the support channel in Discord or reach out to the support team with the reported problem link. That'll help us get back to you right away. But not seeing anything crazy here. This is how you do it. Was happy to walk through it and kind of show the different points along the process. So gonna keep moving here. Got a question from Stephen Wilk. This is the last question in Discord, but I see plenty of questions in the YouTube chat. So still got some time. Okay, Stephen said, can you give me some tips to start NBA DFS process? So, yep, totally can do that. So Stephen, what I will say is that if you go over to our YouTube channel, we've done some awesome content to kick off the NBA season. And where I would go is I would go two places. One place I would go is this how to beat NBA DFS in 2022. So Max Steinberg, high stakes pro and partner at SaberSim, did an interview with Jordan, and Max came on and did a deep dive into his process. It was a very well received show, and I can tell you that if you go into our office hours playlist, we've done tons of NBA content, especially recently. So let me just make sure that we're seeing the latest and greatest. So I would go through our videos from the last month, I would say, or not even a month. I'd say maybe 2-3 weeks. So all things NBA ahead of tip-off of the 2022-23 season, how to beat daily fantasy basketball like an NBA DFS Pro, walking through an NBA process. I walked through basically my entire NBA process in this video. All of these videos have timestamps. You can jump around and only listen to the pieces that matter to you. But I would start with these 3 videos. I think they're 3 really good videos about how to approach NBA DFS. And if you haven't done so, I would definitely recommend checking those out, as well as checking out our DFS profit plan. I think our DFS profit plan is an awesome video, and you could really apply it to all sports. It's a contest portfolio framework that we did research on and came up with suggestions about how to apply your bankroll on a night-to-night basis. So I think if you start with those tools, I do not think you can go wrong. So check those things out. Come back and let me know if you have more questions. All right. We are going to keep rolling here. Got a question from Darren D. And let me get SaberSim pulled back up here before we continue. So Darren said, trying to decide between advanced and starter subscription. What's the advantage of having 500 plus lineups compared to 20 when you can have the same size pool of 1,500? Okay, good question. So, starter versus advanced, right? So on the starter plan, when you build, you can only build 20 lineups and you cannot see the entire pool of 500. So when you come to the advanced plan, now you can build 1,500 lineups and you can view and interact with the entire pool. I think if you are primarily a single entry hand builder 3-max type of player, I think the starter can make sense. If you want to start playing more MME stuff, play some 20 maxes, play some 150 maxes, then I would definitely recommend joining the advanced plan. I think that the advanced plan is for players who, kind of understand DFS, have been playing, and are like really looking to start entering more and more unique lineups into their contests. I think if you're only playing a handful of lineups a night and you want to stay at that range, I think starter can make sense in that scenario. So just kind of have to like ask yourself, what your goals are, and what kind of contests you enjoy playing for DFS. So I think that's like the first question. And if you want to start getting into some of that larger field stuff, managing a portfolio, SaberSim makes it really easy to build and manage more and more lineups. It's almost like there's not like this like incremental manage more lineups, more headache. It's like manage more lineups and the headache is the same. That our entry editor is really, really good. And the way we fill entries and interact with the sites is also really good. So I think that it becomes much easier to manage more lineups with our entry editor. So those are my thoughts. If you have any more questions, just let me know. Okay. Got a question here from Shareable Cortex. Said, forgive my ignorance, but I just found y'all, and I'll be honest, I'm newer to DFS, or at least getting involved, but Saber is a tad confusing. So, to get back to this, what I would say is that I would highly recommend that, go on our YouTube, and then we have this new here, start here first. These are short videos, not these hour-long streams, very like focused and kind of explaining how our tool works and the best uses for all of the new features that we've been coming out with. So like you see like SaberSim's biggest update ever, how to enter your lineups really quickly, how to apply stacks, how to use late swap. And it's just like a playlist of short, quick hitter videos, sports specific content about things that you can do right off the bat to try and use SaberSim to its fullest potential really quickly with less time and less headache on your end, and using the tools to save yourself time and still enter positive EV lineups. So really recommend doing I'm sorry, I didn't put it down. The new here, start here first. This is like the best resource for that. So check it out. Let me know if you guys have any more questions. And then got a follow up here from Darren. Does SaberSim change sims after actual scores have been inputted? For example, if I went back to this past weekend NFL DFS, will it be biased to who performed well? Okay, good question. So the answer is no. So we do pull in actual scores, but we do not use those scores to recalculate the sims at all. The only thing I will say is that there is a time period where in between slates, so the morning games start, or the 1 p.m. Eastern games start, and then before the 4 p.m. Eastern games start, they release inactives, the teams that play, and then sims run. So there will be some sim changes to the later games specifically after lock, which can affect your lineups like rebuilding fresh the next day. But those are the only changes that happen. I would say this question comes in a lot for basketball because the pre-slate context in basketball can be so different from all of the late swap and scratches and news that breaks during basketball. A lot of times people will come and say, hey, I ran builds for basketball from yesterday this morning and got a lot of higher scoring lineups. Why is that? And that's because SaberSim now has all of the news that broke and can build the best lineups as if it knew that before. So, not as big of an issue for NFL, but, to answer your question, no, we don't change any of the sims that have run based on the actuals. So that's the real answer to your question there. Okay. Going back up here, got a question from Patrick. Says, I late swap every time before a slate locks in NBA, regardless if there's breaking news or not. Is it bad that I late swap too much, especially if projections and ownership don't change very much? So, Patrick, good question. I wouldn't say it's necessarily bad at all. I would say that, what you're doing is you're basically saying, like, hey, I don't want to miss any and all news, and I want to squeeze out every edge I can get from stat updates. I think especially in a sport like basketball where projections are really good, I think there's nothing wrong with that approach at all. I think it's a good approach. You're less likely to miss news when it breaks. So, nothing wrong with that. The only thing I will say is that, let's say tonight, for example, I haven't looked at any of the news for tonight, but let's say, there's no news for any of these games and everyone who is expected to play is supposed to play, no questionable players. So the only thing I would say is that, if you're building and you're using the min uniques feature in step 3 of the post build process, is that there's no way at the moment to save your min uniques with late swap. So, if you're coming in here getting your min uniques, to like a very good point, let's say maybe like 4. So, okay, at 4, I'm at like 386. Let's say we're okay with that, right? So boom, I have 4 min uniques, that means that I'm reducing the inter lineup correlation between the lineups in my portfolio to try and smooth out my variance, right? So I save that. I fill these lineups. So if no news breaks, but you late swap, you are technically allowing less min uniques into your lineup. That's because we used to have min uniques as a builder input and we didn't like the way it worked. So we moved it to the post build as like a sorting method. And we really like it in this method. But now in order to do it in late swap, we would have to, since we're only rebuilding each lineup once, we would have to put it back as a builder input, which we wanted to get away from. So it's a little bit of a something that the team is aware of and working on behind the scenes. But what I will say is that you're technically not able to control your min uniques when you late swap. Since we're only rebuilding each lineup once, you're more likely to maintain some min uniques, but you lose some of that control. So I would say that, if there's no news, then, you're more likely to maintain your min uniques, which is a benefit of not late swapping. So you kind of have to like weigh those two features there. I typically don't like to late swap unless I feel it's necessary for this specific reason that I just described. So those are my thoughts on balancing late swap with news and min uniques. I think like if you could find the right balance, then try and use that. But you will always get you will always get more out of late swapping and capitalizing on breaking news than maintaining your min uniques. So I don't want to discourage you from late swapping. Late swapping will always be better because of that late breaking news. So those are my thoughts there. Let me know if you have any follow-up. Okay. Got a question here from Ryan. Ryan said, pros and cons of playing just main slate versus playing multiple slates for NBA. Okay, good question. So what I will say is that, if you're playing multiple slates for NBA, and I think that this is like a better example on like a larger slate, probably, I bet you we have like a large slate tomorrow. No, we're not able to see tomorrow. They haven't released it. So I think Friday was like a big slate. So we're going to go back to Friday, the 28th, and we're going to look at this. I think it was like 11 gamer. So like on like a big slate like this, right? So you have all of these different slates. Some of them are correlated. So, going back to our DFS profit plan, you don't want to play more than 2.5% to 5% of your bankroll on slates that share games or share players. So, playing the main slate means that you're taking into account all of these other games as well. So you wouldn't want to play more than 5% of your bankroll total on these slates if you were to avoid the main slate and maybe only play the 3-game turbo and then like the 2-game night slate. Since none of those games are on the same slate, you could treat them as different and, apply more bankroll. So that's like one way of getting more action down. Another benefit of playing some of these smaller slates is that you can spread out your action and try and capitalize on all of the contests under the $3 threshold. So, DraftKings and FanDuel set limits on what contests you can play based on your amount of money entered over your DFS lifetime or your amount of profit. So, that under $3 threshold is like where the sharks can't play and where we really recommend playing as much money as you possibly can while you still have the availability to play those contests. So if you go in and you play some of the smaller stuff and you just hammer all of the contests under $3, you could probably get more money down playing across all the slates rather than just playing the main slate. So again, that's another advantage. You could probably do that while still playing the main slate and then just try and do it and stay under that 5% threshold. I think that's another option too, but those are some thoughts on why to play some of the turbos, some of the night slates, get more money down at good thresholds where the sharks can't play, where the Max Steinbergs and giant squids do not live. So got this next question here from Joseph. Joseph said, how do I set a rule that I put a player in my lineup with 100% exposure between captain and flex? Okay, so what I would say is that, this is clearly a showdown question. So I'm going to hover over to showdown and we're just going to do it for this slate. Totally fine. So what I would say is I would set a group rule and then I would say use exactly one. And then what I would do is if it's like Lamar Jackson, I want to use Lamar Jackson in the captain or the flex. And I would check him in for both of these position eligibility spots. So check Lamar Jackson captain, check Lamar Jackson flex, and say use exactly one. So that way, every single lineup, sorry about that, will have Lamar Jackson in either the captain or the flex. The builder can decide which slot to put him into. So that's the rule I would set to accomplish that goal. All right. Dat Boy Steven said, do you look at player fantasy point per minute or player usage? So, my answer to this is that both of these metrics are taken into account in the Sims. So the Sims account for minutes, for fantasy points per minute, for player usage. So, if you're interested in looking at these metrics, what you can do is, we have minutes in the app here. These are our average projected minutes played. And then we also have projections. So, you can just do a little calculation and see what those are. I personally do not do the math and care to look at that. I mostly care to look at player upside. So I like to look at percentiles from a position by position basis and see kind of who's popping to me based on like an eye test of salary, ownership, and upside. It's something like I kind of like to use. I like to look at value, who are like the big value plays on the slate. I'll do some research as to why, are players out, why is ownership condensing at 61% for Jalen Williams. So kind of try and like understand some of the slate context. And I think that helps me make better decisions on a slate by slate basis. Okay. Next question here from Shareable Cortex says, I think you guys have a great system, but I wish you guys had show kind of like the rest of the other DFS companies, like a few folks just talking about who they like, etc. You'd blow up. I'm just a simpleton. Just saying it'd be more appealing to the other miscreants. LOL. So I know what you're talking about. You're talking about like core plays. Guys we like. We really are not like a tout show. This show is really supposed to be kind of educational, show people how to go and do research themselves to formulate their own opinions. It's a more of a company decision to not do like the pre-lock shows and the tout shows. We really like the direction we're going in with trying to just teach people how to make these decisions for themselves rather than just tell them who to play. We don't want people, just tell me who the best plays are. It's like, here's how you can find the best plays yourself. I think it's, what's the saying? It's like it's a fishing saying, and it's like, catch a fish for your son, feed him for a day, teach your son to fish, feed him for the rest of his life. We really want to like help our users learn how to fish for themselves in the DFS streets. So that's what we really try and focus our content around. So those are my thoughts there. Not saying you're wrong, but that's just kind of the direction we've gone in as a company. Darren said, nice. I was messing with main slate from past weekend and just found the rules tab. I was using advanced stack to stack no matter what a QB with skill positions, but it was giving me a lot of naked QBs with a secondary stack, 2 wide receivers from the same team with run back. How do I make it to that? A QB must have at least one skill position player. Okay, so if you want to force in stacks, a couple ways to do that. I would say the first thing, you should check out is that if we go over to the NFL main slate here and we go over to the stack types. So first thing I would do is I would come into the stack types. If you don't want any stacks where with a naked QB, just come in and uncheck all these QB plus zeros. So then if you come in and uncheck all these QB plus zeros, that means that the first stack you can get is a QB plus 1. So that way the QB will always be paired with a skill position player. If you don't want to come in and do this every time, you can set a rule. And I would do a stack rule. I would do a basic, and I would do at least, actually, how would I do this? Okay, I would probably do a group rule and group automatic. And I would say use at least 2 from the same team. And this should get you a QB with a pass catcher. So a couple different ways to do it. I think the stack types is the easiest way to do it because you're less likely to make the wrong rule or a rule that does something that you don't expect it to do, as opposed to just coming into the stack types and unchecking the naked QB stacks, because then they're just not available for the builder. So I think that's the easiest way to go about it. Okay, question here for Robbie, from Robbie. Robbie said, is there any way to know if there have been significant changes to projections since your last build? Also, where's the best place to find NBA news such as actives and inactives? Okay, really good question. So this is something that we've been talking about building into the app. There was a wish list, something that a user said that we thought would be really cool. So I think something that we're going to work on in the future is creating like an initial projection column, maybe around like 5 p.m. Eastern, put in like an initial projection, and then that'll lock. And then the SaberSim projection will still update throughout the night, and you can kind of see, who has fluctuated the most. And then you can use tools. A tool that I personally like to use is Basketball Monster. I think Basketball Monster is an awesome reference. So if you go to, I'm going to pull it up for everybody. So they have this fantasy basketball news dashboard. It tells you all of the pending news for the games. You can uncheck this box to see who has already been ruled out. And then this is like a running list in like based on time. So the latest news comes to the top, and then older news is filtered down. They'll also put in these notes, like if somebody's like a important piece of their team, high level news. Sometimes they have monster. Sometimes the news isn't as important or is not like new news. Somebody's continuing to be out, so they won't put those notes. But I think this is like an awesome resource for kind of keeping up with what news is still to come throughout an NBA slate. So that's where I would go to check news. And if there are certain players that you have your eye on, So we have this status column, and we do put an injury status here. So, if you wanted to, you could like scroll and then see who's questionable. We update this regularly, and we're usually really quick to get the new information in, run new sims, get new projections out. It's part of the speed push that like we really like to have over here. We like to be the first to update and get all the news in. So that's like a big thing to us, and we take pride in being really reactive and quick with breaking news. So we're going to move on. Next question here from Patrick. Patrick said, past Sunday, Isaiah Roby was scratched. I late swapped, but I still had some exposure to him. How do I go about it from happening again for the next slate? I had to go into my phone and manually global swap. Okay, so what I will say is that if there's a particular player, so like let's say that I built lineups and my lineups were already in. If you uncheck a player from your player pool, that will not notify SaberSim that the player is now out. So the only time a player is confirmed out by SaberSim is if one, their status says out. So you should be able to see that. So like their status is out. They'll have it. Oh, so SaberSim will recognize that and treat them as out. Or if a player's projection is 0. So for instance, if we had lineups with Tony Bradley in and we came back and he was now out in this exact state where he does not have an out in his status and his projection is 4 points, but he is unchecked from the pool, that will not register as out to SaberSim. The only time that registers out, where you'll get the red lightning that you have players out that must be swapped, is if the status is out and if their projection is 0. So I don't know your exact case, but what can happen is that if you set custom projections, you'll have to, if the status doesn't go to out, you'll have to come in and reset their projection, and then they'll go back down to 0. So not really sure exactly what happened to you, Patrick. Those are two things that I would always check, is that, one, is the status out, and is the projection 0? I would say if you're having trouble with quick swap, with late swap for whatever reason, you can always come in and quick swap. And when you do a quick swap, since this slate hasn't started yet, I can't do it. But, let's say I went to yesterday, and if there's like a particular player, well, basically when you use quick swap, you can type in a player's name. So, if for whatever reason you're having trouble with Isaiah Roby, you can go into quick swap. It'll say, swap out players or swap a specific player. You hit swap a specific player, you type in Roby, you click him, and then it'll swap him with the best available player based on your quick swap. So not really sure what the issue was there. I did not play basketball on Sunday, so I could have been out of the loop as to any issues that were coming up. But those are important things to note: the status, their projection, whether you have custom projections or not, and the ability to quick swap in the app. So let me know if there is anything, any more questions you have there. Okay, Clint, my man Clint was trying to help me out. Teach a man to fish, feed him. There you go. Feed a man a fish, feed him for a day. Teach a man to fish, feed him for the rest of his life. Thank you, Clint, for helping me out. I was struggling. I knew it, just couldn't get the exact phrasing right. Okay, question here from Manny. Hi, Andrew. Are the office hours now at 3 p.m. Eastern, or was this only for this week? Okay, Manny, good question. So, we are shuffling some things around behind the scenes. I would say, I'll make an announcement if the time is going to change again. I would say, for the rest of this week, it will be at 3 p.m. Eastern. Just had to make some adjustments. I don't know if any more time changes are coming. If we do, we will make sure to keep everybody in the loop. Prefer to not change it midweek. Prefer to change it on a Monday. So if anything changes, I will update everybody on stream and in Discord. Okay. Darren said, how do you import projections, say, from RunPure? So we are partnered with RunPure. Run Pure Sports uses our builder to build their lineups. So we have special features. So if you are on a Run Pure subscription and have the Run Pure SaberSim version, what will happen is that the Run Pure coordinators will upload their projections into the SaberSim app. They have a specific time that they do that. I don't know what their release schedule is just because I don't use them. But if you were to, reach out to the Run Pure team in their Discord, I'm sure somebody would be able to tell you, what their release schedule is, but they will go and release projections into the app for you. You should also have a drop down here where you can use like Big T's player pool or Hoops player pool or some of their other members that they offer player pools for. So I would just reach out to them and kind of get some more information. I don't know what their schedule is. Okay, got a question here from Noah. Noah said, if I'm creating NFL lineups for cash, how would I go about burning one player? So picking a few different $200 players. I tried 10x 200 players and setting them each at 10%, but that didn't work. So picking 200 USD players to save on salary for my other 5 players. Okay, so this sounds like a showdown question. So what I would do is I would set a group rule. And what I would do is I would come in here. So, let's go to flex and then let's just sort by salary. So what Noah's asking is like, hey, I want to use a player who is under the at the $200 salary range. So first thing I would do is I would set a filter. So, include players where my projection is greater than 0.01. That way we get rid of the players that, where did my filter go? Okay. With projection greater than 0.01 for flex save. So I'm not sure where my filter is. So let's try this on the upcoming slate. Might have some more luck here. Could just be an issue with a past slate. So, okay, usually I have this. Okay, greater than 0.01. Okay, perfect. So if I come to my flex, it should get rid of players that do not have that. So he's basically saying, I want to use one of these 3 players to try and save on salary. So I would create a rule. I would go to group, manual, and you could probably do this as an automatic rule too. So I'll show you 2 different ways. So you come in here, you click in the players that are 200 salary, and then you say use at least 1. So that way 1 player will always be used. Other option is create an automatic rule and then say use at least 1. And then we're going to uncheck captain. We're going to say flex where salary is less than, and then I would just put 300 and then boom. So then now if I look at this rule, if I save it as a manual rule, what I can come in and do is, so basically this rule will carry over slate to slate, and you don't have to check to see who is underneath that threshold, but it'll always make sure that 1 player gets into your lineups. So I would either do it manually or automatically. 2 options for you there, but that'll make sure that at least one of them always gets in there. As long as they're fairly closely projected, I think that you should get like a decent mix of all of them, but at least it'll get at least 1 into every single lineup. So if you're building 20 lineups and you have a pool of 1,500, you're going to have plenty of options if you want to then go and adjust your exposure to each of them in the post-build process. So that's how I would do that. So let's see. Daboy Steven said, what other sites do you look at for research or find edge over the field? Okay, so, this is something that Max Steinberg likes to talk about a lot. He does a lot of research outside of the app, listens to different podcasts, and does research on different free websites. I know that one for basketball that he likes to use is Popcorn Machine. I would say that, it's a pretty interesting app if you've ever messed around with it. So I'm going to throw it up on screen right now. So basically what you can do is you can come into this app and you can click into game flow for any single game, and it'll tell you, who was on the court, what did they do in their individual spurts on the court, and it'll show it, quarter by quarter, and you can kind of see who swaps in for who. So like right here, like Okongwu was the first in when Capella came out, and you can kind of try and draw some conclusions about game flow. Pretty advanced strategy, and I think it takes like a special nuance to be able to get like really good value out of that. I know for football, Max really talks about listening to outside podcasts, ETR, PFF, listening to what those guys have to say, trying to figure out where Steam is building on certain players throughout the week, trying to find good nuggets of information to apply to his own process, even for showdown stuff, coaches quotes, watching interviews, trying to see who coaches want to play more, things that the sim really can't pick up on, some of that more obscure value. I think that, if you're interested in that, you can try and apply that to your process. Not something I particularly do, but I know that there is edge to be had if you are able to do those things. So just some thoughts there for you. If you have more questions like that, I would definitely ask about whatever sport you're talking about, whether it's NFL, whether it's NBA, throw a message in the Discord server for that specific channel and see what people in the community have to say about it. I'm only one person. I think that, there are a lot of sharp people in the community, and they have a lot of great ideas. So, you can find a lot of useful information in there. Okay. Got another question right here from Rich Riley. This is our last question. We just got through all of the questions in YouTube chat. I see one more question in Discord, so I'm going to get this in here. If you guys have any last questions you want to get answered before we get out of here, get them in now. Okay. Rich said, I would love to see a profit plan contest selection show specifically for FanDuel, especially since their contests can be hard to max out, since most are 150 max entry, struggling to figure out the best contests. Okay, so Rich, one thing I do want to say is that, our profit plan is really not made to be like I don't think the best way to apply it is to only play on one site. I think the best way to apply it is to play on as many sites as you can at the low stakes. I think that's like the best way. Like, you shouldn't just play the $3 stuff under FanDuel. If that's only thing available to you, that's like a different story. If you're like our founder, Matt, Matt is up in Oregon, no DraftKings up there, only FanDuel. So, that's like a specific case. I understand. But, if you do have the ability to play on both FanDuel and DraftKings, I would highly recommend working both of them into your process for the reasons we've talked about avoiding the sharks and getting as much money down underneath those thresholds as possible. In the past, we've done a lobby walkthrough and kind of shown where you can try and get money down in like a hypothetical process. I'm not sure where those videos are. I could try and find one after the stream, and we could talk about it a little bit. I can call it out on tomorrow's stream. So I'll make a note to myself to say, try and find an old contest selection video with a hypothetical and kind of show you like how to navigate the contest lobby. What I will say is always play stuff that you can max out first. I think that's the best thing to do. But I know like for NBA, for FanDuel specifically, they have the 5 cent 150 max. They have the 25 cent 20 max. They have some single entries like a 1, a 2, a 5. They have a $3. They have a $10. So I would say, always best to max out the contest you're playing. And then as you start to use more of your bankroll, then you can make some decisions on where to only play a portion of certain contests depending on how much money you have left. So I'll follow up and see if I can find one of those videos tomorrow. But that being said, everybody, that was our last question. Had a really good stream today. Glad to see the streams getting a lot of interaction, a lot of people asking questions live. That's what we're really here for. So we'll be right back here tomorrow. If you're not a member of SaberSim, there's a link in the description below to a no strings attached 7-day free trial. Jump in on the action, get access to the Discord server, and start asking questions among members of the community. So good luck in your contest tonight, and we will be right back here tomorrow. See ya.